Alejandro Garnacho. Is this a goer, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite the news, isn't it, really, in terms of like two huge clubs, Chelsea and Manchester United. Would they do business? Garnacho and Borussia Dortmund's Jamie Gittins are two players that Chelsea are looking at in this transfer window, and Chelsea would like a winger. Whether they'll be able to get this player remains to be seen, though.
Well, Paul, what is Manchester United's view of this?
Yep, so Manchester United have basically made clear that they see him having a future. Ruben Amorim has started him the last two games. I think what they're keen to focus in on with Garnacho is that clearly there is a player of immense talent here. This is somebody who could go on and become, with some consistency and some improvements here or there, could make a real impact on this Manchester United team in the long term. So that's where they see him. They see him as their player long term. They just want him to improve and listen. And, you know, the signs are 2 starts in the last 2 games show that maybe he's responded well to the early demands from Amorim.
But Paul, is this the same Manchester United who a couple of weeks ago said everyone's for sale? Everybody in their squad could be bought.
Yeah, sometimes
Man United.
Sometimes that can be used as a motivational tool as well. No player, unless you're Haaland on a 9.5-year contract, you know, no player is going to have that complete security if things change in football so quickly. That sometimes it's used as a motivational tool. Other times, and quite clearly with the Manchester United squad, they are keen to improve their squad, but to do that, of course, they also need to move on some players. Garnacho, we get the feeling, isn't one of those. They very much see him as, for the long term, somebody who could make an impact at the club, but needs to listen to what Ruben Amorim wants of him.
Right, a name that's popped up in the last couple of days, Matthijs Tel. What's an update on his situation?
The update on him is that he will stay at Bayern this month, or certainly he wants to. He's unwilling to move to Chelsea. We know Chelsea explored the possibility of signing him, and it's obviously linked to Bayern Munich's interest in Christopher Nkunku. But Tel is determined to fight for his place at Bayern Munich. He was moving in the right direction nicely under Thomas Tuchel, of course understudy to Harry Kane, but you know, not many people are getting in ahead of Kane, but he was happy with his minutes, he was happy with how things were progressing. Maybe being a little bit more frustrated this season, not playing as much, but is determined to do well at Bayern and make a success of it. So yeah, Chelsea kind of set to be disappointed in that sense because he wants to stay at Bayern this month.
Okay, a name we've said on every transfer show, on every day, is Marcus Rashford. What's the latest on him?
Yeah, this came to us in the last 20 minutes or so. AC Milan are cooling their interest in Manchester United forward Marcus Rashford, according to Sky in Italy. But that pricked the ears of maybe some Premier League clubs who might have last-minute interest in Marcus Rashford. We mentioned, didn't we, last week, there was interest from West Ham United in Marcus Rashford. And I'm gonna say it again, if there's interest in West Ham and they feel that they might be able to get him, I would imagine other Premier League clubs might feel that they might want to have a little go at that too.
If Milan are cooling their interest in him, does that mean they've got a whisper that someone else is closer to getting him?
Maybe, Mike, or this is the interesting one here. If they don't go for Rashford, Milan would be free to move for Kyle Walker of Manchester City. Now, there's Serie A rules that AC Milan have one spot available for a UK or an Albanian player, and Walker now appears to be the viable target. So a big update on 2 players there.
OK, all right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk Arsenal. What on earth are Arsenal up to? We keep saying they need a striker. We've said it, the fans have said it, Paul Merson said it yesterday. What does Mikel Arteta say? That's coming up next. Hello again, this is the Transfer Show. Well, we're going to talk Arsenal, and that means we're going to talk strikers. Everybody says they want one. Mikel Arteta says they are looking to bring in attacking reinforcements following those injuries to Bukayo Saka and Gabriel Jesus.
At the moment, we don't have them. We are trying, as I said, actively to find the best possible solution, but we will have to
find the right player. What profile are you looking for in the forward that you want to bring in?
Obviously, it's not something that I'm going to discuss here. Obviously, we have lost 2 massive players for us in the front line, and we need some support there.
So they're looking, Paul. They've caved to the avalanche of pressure. They're looking. Are they still looking at Benjamin Sesko?
He is a player of interest. He has been a player of interest for Arsenal. The problem with Sesko is that he is contracted until 2029, and it doesn't appear that he's in any rush to leave. You know, there is a suggestion that there's a gentleman's agreement that he can leave at the right time for the right price. So I think everyone's quite relaxed. His agent, certainly, Elvis Basanovic, has been speaking to us here at Sky Sports News this week. This is what he has had to say on Sesko's immediate future. I think we can have a look at this. He said, "We are aware of interest from several top clubs for a long time. If you ask me if Sesko will move in January, I can only say Sesko is happy with his development in RB Leipzig at the moment, and he is an RB Leipzig player with a long-term contract. We respect that, and that's why RB Leipzig is the right address for these kinds of questions. So, in other words, ask the club, because they will decide when he leaves, and only if they get the right price will they be tempted to sell Sesko."
Is the contract length the issue here, the sticking point?
On a long-term contract as he is on, 2029, that clearly gives the selling club a real advantage, unless a release clause does exist that Arsenal can come in and just pay that and do that. Without that, the selling club has the real advantage in the negotiations.
Michael, if Arsenal don't get a striker in January, do you think the fans will swallow that?
No, I think they'll like to bring someone in, because I think they've got a massive opportunity in the league. I really do. They're not out of the League Cup yet, but that's going to be a real tough task. The second leg in Newcastle, 2-0 down. They're out of the FA Cup, so they're going to have a free weekend for the fourth round. They've got the Champions League. If they get in the top 8 of that, then they might. I think they're well in this title race. They are well in this title race, so it's a big opportunity.
OK, big news for Manchester City. How about Manchester United? We're going to get to Marcus Rashford, because despite looking to be out of the running to sign him, Borussia Dortmund are now pushing to make a move. Sky Germany understands that internal talks were held and the club have now made the decision to pursue him on loan. AC Milan are also actively trying to secure a deal themselves. Dan, we've spoken quite a bit already about AC Milan's interest and Barcelona's, and we also discussed the fact that both of those clubs have players in his favoured position on the left who are quite good, who are going to be very hard for him to dislodge. How about Dortmund? How would he fit in at Dortmund?
Yeah, well, Dortmund are stacked with attacking talent as well. You've seen the impact that Gittins has made this season for Dortmund on the flank. So if he was to go there, obviously there would be obstacles in the way. But that's the nature of moving to any high-level club. They're going to have squads, they're going to have depth. So I don't think anything like that would make Rashford shirk going. I think this is a player now should be at the peak of his career. A player that's been at Manchester United his whole career. The relationship seems to have completely broke down from his perspective and the club's perspective as well. So both parties probably need to make something happen this January. I think he'll look at other examples that we're going to come on to of how players have rebuilt themselves at Dortmund. But I think for the player as well, moving out the Premier League, moving out the country, I actually think that would be a really positive thing for him to go to Dortmund. They're not going well in the Bundesliga. They're mid-table, a little bit in the wilderness at the moment, although a run put together and they could get themselves towards the top 5. But in the Champions League, they've got a very, very good chance of finishing in the top 8, and we saw what that club did in the Champions League last season. And Rashford, at his best, is a high-level player. He'll want to play at the highest level. He'll want to play somewhere that gives him a chance of getting back into the England setup. So for me, with Dortmund's track record, I don't think there could be a better place for him to go.
And with Daniel Marlin's access as well, they've got a position there that needs to be filled.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned there, Daniel, Dortmund's track record. So if you're Marcus Rashford and his representatives, are you looking at what being at Dortmund did for Jude Bellingham, what it did for Jadon Sancho, and is that a big tick in their box?
I think even going abroad for players that are playing in the Premier League, it's a breath of fresh air sometimes. We've seen Sancho, we've seen Bellingham go from the Championship even to the Bundesliga. But I think for Rashford, with that sort of family feel that they have at Dortmund, it could be what he needs. Yeah. That arm around him, the yellow wall behind him. So I think Rashford, a new lease of life in a different league, new surroundings, he could thrive.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it, how players just seem to be able to settle in there and hit the ground running, particularly young English players. From Man United's point of view, Kweku, are they only bothered about which club is going to pay the highest proportion of Marcus Rashford's wages? Or might they also be thinking, OK, well, maybe if he goes to Dortmund, he's got a better chance of success than, say, at Barcelona, and then his value will be higher in the summer when we think about selling him?
There's a combination of factors when it comes to Marcus Rashford. The player's welfare is also a huge part of it as well. They want to make sure he goes to an environment where he can hit the ground running and not only increase his transfer value, but also find a place where he can be happy and play football again. He didn't feature for Manchester United yesterday in their win against Southampton. He's clearly out of Amorim's plans. But for Man United, if you're talking straight business, you have to look at your sellable assets. We've talked about Manchester United's aging squad in terms of those players who've got 6 months left on their contract. They haven't got any sell-on value. But if you look at a player like Marcus Rashford, if he has a good 6 months at a team like Dortmund or an AC Milan, then that could be a player that could bring in a lot of money for Manchester United, because we understand their constrictions when it comes to PSR, and they need to make sure that a player like Marcus Rashford leaves them, but for a suitable fee.
Pure profit as well if he goes.
Yeah.
Which is a big thing nowadays.
It is. We've been talking about it a lot, haven't we? He's in demand. Anyway, that is the thing. He is in demand, Marcus Rashford. How about Newcastle? Can they go 10 matches unbeaten? Eddie Howe's side host his former side, Bournemouth, tomorrow. Back to transfer talk. Let's get to Marcus Rashford. Despite looking to be out of the running to sign him, Borussia Dortmund are now pushing to make a move. Sky Germany understands that internal talks were held and the club have made the decision to pursue him on loan. AC Milan are also actively trying to secure a deal themselves. We've spoken, haven't we, Dan, about AC Milan and Barcelona in the last couple of weeks, about how stacked they are in Rashford's favoured position on the left and up front, to be fair, as well. How about Borussia Dortmund? Is this an easier 11 to break into for him?
Possibly squad depth-wise, yes, but in his preferred position, and I get that every club has to have a squad and have players to choose from. Jamie Gittins is playing there at the moment and playing very well. Whilst we've been on air, interestingly, the Athletic are reporting that Bayern Munich hold an interest in Gittins, yet another player maybe that will make the move from Dortmund to Bayern Munich. We've seen that many times before. For Rashford and Manchester United, I think they both need to distance themselves from each other. I think it's clear that Rashford needs a fresh environment. Me personally, I think at the peak of his career, which is where he's at now, I think being away from England and being away from the Premier League would be a really positive thing for him. And we've seen other players go to Dortmund and flourish. Dortmund are going really well in the Champions League, got a really good chance of qualifying automatically for the knockouts. Not going so well in the Bundesliga. So from I spoke to Kevin Hatchard earlier actually, he kind of said that Dortmund just needs something right now, a good news story, and he feels that Marcus Rashford could be that good news story. But there's still, even going there, still barriers to getting in the team. So it's an interesting one over the next few weeks. But I do really hope the Rashford moves somewhere, because I want to go and see him flourish somewhere.
Well, he may well do. And there's a lot of interest in him, Molly. We've had AC Milan, Juve initially. There was a bit of interest. Possibly Barcelona and Dortmund have now revived their interest. These are big clubs. Are we surprised that so many big clubs are in for him, or not really?
I'm not surprised at all, to be honest. Yes, OK, form hasn't been Marcus Rashford's strong point over the last maybe 2 years or so, but there's no doubt he's a 27-year-old man. There's still plenty of his career left. Obviously, he's got a bit of a brand that's coming with him as well that I'm sure Dortmund would quite fancy. But aside from that, from a footballing perspective purely, his speed, his skill and his goal-scoring ability is still going to be very much there, isn't it? It's still within the player, and I appreciate he's dropped off the radar, but I think that player is still very much in there. A lot of people talk about that 22-23 season and how many goals he scored then, 17 goals in 35 Premier League appearances. That was only 2 seasons ago. There's still time, and as we always talk about with players and clubs, it is so important that he feels the love. If he gets that arm around him at Dortmund, like we've seen with Jadon Sancho, and how that's made him into such, a much more confident player within himself, he's flourishing at Dortmund, and I think that clearly players talk.
Yeah,
that could be massive for him.
Really good point, that, isn't it? Is that something that gives Dortmund the edge, maybe, on some of the other competitors? He can look at the examples of Bellingham, Sancho, players who've gone there, English players, and they've flourished immediately. They've got a great record of nurturing English talent there.
They have. They've got an incredible record when it comes to young English players. But then you look at the other contender in this, AC Milan, and you look at young British players who are over there doing quite well. You think about Fikayo Tomori, you think about Ruben Loftus-Cheek, who's not that young anymore. You think about Tammy Abraham, who's there on loan. So he's got options, Marcus Rashford, as he should. He's a player that has delivered previously, like you touched on, Molly. 22-23 seasons only 2 years ago, and he led Manchester United to a third-place finish in the Premier League. They won the League Cup. They got to the final of the FA Cup. It was a very good season for him, playing in a multitude of positions, not just on the left, but also down the middle, which will be very attractive to clubs who are pursuing him. The fact that he is multifaceted. Obviously, he's got his preferred position on the left, but he's a player that still has so much to offer. It's just not at Manchester United, and he's made that clear. The club have made that clear with their actions. He wasn't in the matchday squad for the game against Southampton yesterday. So a new start, a fresh start at a club like Borussia Dortmund could definitely reignite his career.
All right, let's move on to West Ham then, because they're focused on signing a new striker in this window. The list grows, actually, of potential targets. Evan Ferguson, John Duran, Rodrigo Muniz, Tayo Awoniyi at Nottingham Forest, Nice's Evan Gesson and RB Leipzig's Andre Silva are all on their target list. Kwaku, Bowen is back in training, but Füllkrug is a fairly long-term absentee. Antonio certainly is, and he's going to be 35 soon anyway. Would it make sense to look for a long-term option rather than a short-term one here?
Definitely. If you think about Füllkrug before the injury, our colleague in Germany, Florian Pettenberg, was reporting that he was of interest to clubs in Germany. So I don't foresee his long-term future being at West Ham, and he is in his 30s as well. Think about the injuries, like you mentioned, to Jarrod Bowen and to some of the key players up top. Mikel Antonio, by the time he returns, is going to be 35 years old. It's imperative for West Ham to look for a long-term option. They found it difficult to find that striker, that person who could put the ball in the back of the net regularly, but this should be their priority in this window for sure.
Dan, who do you think would be the most realistic target of those names I've mentioned?
I think Evan Ferguson, someone that Potter's worked with before, someone as a short-term option so they can re-evaluate what they're looking for a long-term forward. In the summer, I think there'd be an element of trust from Brighton with Potter, still good relationship between the two. Ferguson needs to play games, West Ham need a striker. It's a match made in short-term heaven.
Go along with that?
I would, yeah. I think, 20 years old under Graham Potter, a lifetime ahead of him potentially at West Ham. Been hampered with injury previously, now's his time to shine. He was billed as one of the best strikers in the league at one point, up-and-coming strikers, so no doubt.
Yeah, and Fulham might want to hold on to Muniz, Forest might want to hold on to Awoniyi, we just don't know.